Hello everyone, Phreak here. Welcome to my patch 8.11 rundown for League of Legends. This is going to be a very interesting patch. It is the third of four of the big mid-season patches. This year they decided that they wanted to split up mid-season across four patches to go lane by lane, although each of these changes of course does have individual spillover, which is fine, that's how the game works. Roles interact and items interact. But 8.9 was mid lane slash mages, 8.10 was jungle and some stuff, 8.11 is going to be bot lane, although AD assassins are going to care a lot about the changes here, and 8.12 is going to be air quotes top lane, but it's really every fighter in the game cares about those changes as well. So going to be fun, going to be interesting to look at. Let's get into this one. One thing I want to point out as we get into it, 8.11 by everything that I can tell is going to be the first patch of the competitive season for the summer split. For those of you watching at home, pretty much once this video comes out and this patch comes out to everyone's servers, EULCS starts in 14 days. And so unless Riot wants to release 8.12 early, which I don't think is going to happen, or they want to say 8.12 is coming out on Tuesday, everyone play in the LCS on Thursday on this patch, which they don't do, 8.11 is then going to be the patch because it's in 2 weeks for the summer split to start. Okay, so Pyke exists. He looks really cool, much like any new champion is kind of hard to play. People will be very bad at him on day one, and if it's anything like Kai'Sa, they'll complain about how 500 range is too weak and they can't make it happen. Whatever, Pyke's going to be cool, excited to play with him, sounds fun. First up, they're finally doing some compensation changes for the 8.9 mana changes. In my opinion, they were probably not needlessly, but they were, let's say, coarse. The mana changes were like, yep, we're going to cut that all by 1/3 and this all by 30%, and there you go. And it was like the same percentage for every champion in the game, regardless of how much of their mana pool was at level 1 versus scaling. They didn't really target stuff very aggressively, or they didn't target stuff in a very nuanced way, which I think is fine because it's actually very hard to measure the true impact the changes will have. It's better to just wait for the changes to come out, see what happened to the champions, then buff or nerf as needed. I know that can feel really bad if you're like in a Nivea one trick and you got hurt more than the other champions, and for a month your champion was just weak. But from a game development perspective and like respecting man hours and getting other changes into the game, I think it was still the right choice to be somewhat coarse with their numbers selection. It just can feel bad when your main gets adversely affected. Again, still think it was the right choice, and here's the first of many compensation buffs. Anivia's first 4 ranks of Q have a better cooldown, and there's a higher ability power ratio for later game team fighting. Here's that math real quick. Is it even going to... Oh, it's doing a ... for me. There we go. So yeah, the cooldown, right, much better until level 13. Here is Q's damage based on how much ability power you have. 30 AP is basically Doran's Ring plus runes, and it's 2% more damage for most of the game. If you get into very end game builds, you're looking at the 7 to 8% mark when you're getting into the 4 to 800 AP. So non-trivial amounts of damage increased. Her burst is now stronger, but slightly less good at wave clearing, which to be honest is still a good way to shift the Nevia's power, so not going to complain. Also probably got affected a lot by like the Archangel's changes, for example. It wasn't just that, but so Archangel's got nerfed, Enemy's mana pool got nerfed, that's where she ended up. Graves, definitely an overbearing jungler right now. I do kind of feel like the most recent round of buffs were too much. Graves, I was like, well, in 8 or whatever the buffs were, I was like, yeah, Graves feels like he's actually already okay, and then sure enough became one of the biggest champions in competitive. For what it's worth, these nerfs, generally speaking, are not as big as his last round of buffs. The ult cooldown specifically is better at all points in the game than it pretty much ever has been before 8.8. So generally speaking, Graves should still be very strong. Here's some numbers on that. The base AD, of course, being base AD, as time goes on, it means less, but this will affect his jungle clear a little bit in the very beginning of the game. And 10, 5, 0 seconds off the ultimate means very, very little, but at least, hey, hashtag clean numbers, 120, 90, 60. Yeah, I mean, they're just little small love taps because, again, most of the designer's time was spent on the mid-season updates, I'm pretty sure, and so just some stat changes. Seems fine. Seems cool with me. Next up, a big update to Kha'Zix R no longer does the passive stealth in Brush, which I am very happy about. I think it's a very good change to make him have to commit his ultimate to turning invisible. There were a bunch of inelegant other possible solutions that I don't think the designers tried, but you could have thought of. Like, for example, the passive version of the R would have been camouflage, but the active would have been invisible, which just feels really janky, and I'm glad that wasn't a thing, but like that would have let him not run through control wards. End of the day, they're buffing the cooldown very, very slightly in later ranks. They're nerfing the unevolved R in duration. That's, of course, being compensated by the cooldown difference very slightly. Probably still a weaker skill if you don't evolve R. But if you do evolve R, you get a 2-second long stealth 3 times, which is really, really massive. You just lose the brush passive stealth. This seems really good. 2 seconds is a very long time. I don't know his Q cooldown off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure this gets you pretty close to the territory of getting to jump on someone, Q auto, turn invisible for 2 seconds, and then auto and probably Q again pretty soon. And you do that 3 times, which is pretty nutty. So this feels like Kha'Zix's R evolve should still be exciting, which is nice. And it will take some time for people to learn how to play around this now. I expect Kha'Zix to like lose some win rate on day 1 or 2, but end of the day, Kha'Zix should probably still be wonderfully fine. There's even a chance, not saying it's going to happen, but I think there's even a chance Kha'Zix is stronger as a result, which is going to be very scary. But yeah, 6 seconds of invisibility is a freaking lot in team fights. It's actually nuts. Next up, some buffs to Kindred. Is back to a sub 50% win rate champion. Kindred, I think, could definitely use the power. So Marks respawning faster is just great overall. First Mark spawning sooner is quite nice as well. Keep in mind, Kindred got hurt by the fact that there's less scuttle crabs in the map, and so there's just less like easy to acquire marks, and so it's like, okay, let's just spawn them more quickly. I still think Kindred could use a design update at some point, and maybe one day that'll happen. But I think Kindred should probably be less reliant on marks than currently. And until that happens, life's going to be pain. Or at least, like, getting to the first 4 should be easy or something, right? But either way, that's not what this topic's about or what this video's about, so we're going to move on. Little quality of life thing for LeBlanc. You can now queue up WR or RW. That's cool. Seems to be performing pretty well as a champion, I feel like, LeBlanc. So whatever, some quality of life stuff. Will still be a scary champion to face. That's fine, whatever. Lee Sin next up. Lee Sin, I don't think is that weak of a performer. He did lose some power with his trinket wards being on a longer cooldown. That definitely is a thing that affected him. In 8-8, though, we saw him get played in competitive a fair bit. We saw him at MSI, so clearly the champion is reasonably playable. Seems to function, to a decent level, but gaining some energy restore and gaining cooldown counting on Q, W, and E. So first of all, here's the stuff on the energy restore. Only matters at level 7 or higher, but actually pretty meaningful energy difference. So basically this means that cooldown builds are less of a trap. That was actually one thing that the designer wanted to specifically look at, is that cooldown builds felt really bad on Lee Sin because you tended to just run out of energy and you couldn't do your thing. So your energy restore is much, 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 much nicer. And that's cool. That's really cool. What he also did is had this great update here. Well, actually it's this one, where CDR now applies properly for the duration. So the way dual abilities work, ones where they exist in the background while other things are happening, I could be wrong, but I'm going to give you my best understanding of what's going on here. League of Legends engine is not that good for abilities, actually. The designers have found ways to work around it and all that, but it's not too great. My understanding is the way dual abilities are coded for cooldowns and whatnot is, like, once your Q becomes Resonating Strike instead of Sonic Wave, you no longer actually have Sonic Wave on the kit. It's gone. You can't cast it again. You don't have the ability. And so the way the game kept track of your cooldowns is it said, okay, what time in game is it? Okay, cool. That's when the ability comes back from cooldown. And then basically, it said, what time in game is it? Okay, cool. When you get the ability back, it says, we're back. The ability's here again. Here's the remaining cooldown. And it basically used like the game timer to then reinform when the cooldown should show up and like when it should start ticking down normally again. My understanding is that this has been updated now to properly reflect cooldown reduction when doing that math. Meaning that, like, essentially, I ran math on it, assuming that what I'm saying is correct. If it was a 10-second cooldown of an ability, which is like one of the ranks of Q and most of the ranks of E, if you have a 10-second cooldown ability and you actually had max CDR 40%, and you took the full 3 seconds to reactivate or just let it time out, like you ward hopped and then didn't hit Iron Will, this will save you up to 1.2 seconds off the cooldown. because that's what you weren't getting when you're not at 40% CDR for 3 seconds. You get 1.2 seconds back off your abilities. And so this could be a really, really big deal because, of course, Warrior Enchant gives you 10, and if you are going for something like Black Cleaver, that's another 20. If you run Transcendence, which you probably shouldn't, but if you did, that's 10 right there, or if you go for something else. Anyway, it's not that hard to get, 20, 30, even 40 CDR, so actually a meaningful update to his cooldowns overall, a meaningful update to his energy regeneration. I think Lee Sin will probably still end up being on the weak side for the general player base, but I think Lee Sin experts will find themselves having a lot more success, and that's really cool. Again, we'll probably still be sub 50, but I think Lee Sin can live sub 50 and be fine, because if you're good at the champion, you're going to do well. Next up, Rakan nerfs. Rakan was the #1 support at MSI, was, I believe, the highest pick ban champion of the entire tournament. And support has not really changed much since 8.8, so pretty fair that Rakan individually gets some nerfs here. Basically, this ends up being a 20% nerf to the heal and a 20 to 7% nerf to the shield. It's a flat 10 off the shield at all ranks. And as we mentioned, again, the heal is down 20%. So you're probably still going to max E second because the level incentive is no worse than before. But overall, going to be less of a safety champion, which actually I quite like. Rakan's strength seems to be sort of facilitating all-ins, going for the aggressive plays, trying to fight people. And okay, yeah, not getting rewarded for landing Qs kind of feels bad. That's like one of his actual, sort of skillful abilities in lane. He's kind of not. But still, I think this is fair that you have to nerf the champion, and so they nerf the defensive aspects of the champion. Seems fair to me. I think it's pretty smart. Next up, a pretty big reshape to Talia. And I actually think this is almost all really good design choices. Okay, so she gets 15 more base move speed and gets her 30 health back that she got nerfed a while ago. Okay, great, that's in there. As compensation for losing 15 move speed, she loses the worked ground move speed. And the worked ground move speed, by the way, was actually quite high. In addition to losing this and gaining this move speed, she also has a gigantic buff to rock surfing, where it's 10 to 5% stronger, but also turns on much more quickly. And for what it's worth, by the way, my understanding of how rock surfing works is are you in combat or did you even just press Q? If you pressed Q, it turned off as well. So basically, base move speed up, roaming move speed up, but in combat move speed is down. Here is the math on this. That's not the thing. That's Rakan's... What? I'm trolling. Okay, here we go. I don't know what this is. I think that's... Actually, I know what that is. It's not important at all. It also means that I probably did something wrong. Whatever. Let's move on. So Talia's base move speed, we can see, is 15 higher. Her move speed on her Q, because there's no longer Q worked ground move speed, is still 340. And you can see even from level 1, she is immediately slower by 18, and by the end of the game, slower by 50 move speed. She is definitely slower in combat while casting Qs. However, her move speed with her passive and her buffed base movement speed is plus 52 at level 1, which is really massive. And by the end of the game, because it's only 5% higher instead of 10% higher, still up a solid almost 40. So what this means is she is definitely a better roamer. She roams much, much faster. And for fun, I also included passive plus Q in case you would happen to have worked ground on the way as you're running. I assumed they stacked. I don't see why they wouldn't. And in fact, it would still be faster in the first 7 levels and then eventually slower later on in the game. Passive plus Q I think was actually a pretty rare scenario anyway. But basically, she is way less kitey in combat and better at roaming. Right? These are the parts that actually matter because he's actually going to be using these parts of the kit when fighting people. So slower in combat, faster when roaming. Cool, that's the math there. Of course, there is more. Q no longer deals area of effect damage. Oh my word. Now, the AoE was small. You typically did not hit multiple champions. Occasionally you would. It will still, in some cases, be a teamfight DPS drop. Yes, of course. However, as compensation, minions no longer take reduced damage from additional rocks. So now it's a math problem. Because, of course, sometimes you would hit 2 or 3 minions, and sometimes you wouldn't. And if you would hit minions multiple times, of course, your rocks would do bonus damage, and now they would do reduced damage, and now they won't. I ran the math. So let's say you lined up 3 minions and landed all 5 rocks. You were doing about 2/3 as much damage as before, 64%. Now, overkilling could happen. There are ways in which you might get screwed based on numbers and, there's things that could happen, like, and I'll play both sides of that, right? So let's say, for example, old Talia Q could one-shot caster minions. Then you would cast Q once, and on the 5th bullet, you would kill all 3 caster minions. Let's say a different scenario. Let's say you're in a scenario where the old spell actually wouldn't one-shot caster minions or one-shot melee minions, but now a rock or two rocks will outright kill the minion. Now you cast a spell and you kill 1, kill 2, and now you have 1 half-health minion. You can then auto-attack it 3 times, it falls over, and off you can roam. That is oftentimes a better scenario than 3 minions at 1/3 HP. It can be. I'm not saying it is, but it can be. In general, I expect this to be a wave clear nerf. Now, the other thing to point out is if you are only hitting 2 minions with Q, it is 96% as much damage. Unless you are getting to extreme overkill scenarios, which seems unlikely, but could happen because you're shooting an odd number of rocks. And like you might get it to 5% on number 2 and then kill it with number 3, you've now overkilled by quite a bit. But you are doing 96% as much damage overall to 2 minions. She's, of course, also better at killing cannon minions because there's no drop-off and no AoE. End of the day, I, again, still expect it to be a wave clear nerf, but not as egregious as you might think. Keep in mind also, worked ground Qs cost literally 1 mana now. So you press your Q, and by level 9, it's a 3-second cooldown. You just spend 1 mana. Spend 1 mana. Spend 1 mana. Costs you basically nothing, you'll be okay. It means that her mana constraints are down quite a bit in team fights as well because she can still just throw Qs at champions and everything else. So this is going to be interesting. It's going to be hard to fully guess what all of this is going to be in terms of Fallout, but I know their goal is that it should be a nerf to her wave clear because she is way better in pro than she is in solo queue. She is, I didn't check, but I'm pretty sure she's sub 50 in solo queue and was the number 2 behind Karma, and Karma was a flex pick, so her numbers are inflated. Talia was the 2nd most sought after mid laner at MSI, right? So huge pro pick, underpowered in solo queue. We've seen this before. There's that. However, she got other compensation. W is the ability you max last and basically became max rank for W. Keep in mind the damage rank up on W is absolute crap. It's like 40 or 20 or something really terrible damage while also costing 10 more mana. You might just not even rank up W at level 15. You're going to, but like there's very much not a reason. I also want to point out, by the way, that Seismic Shove being a 16-second cooldown for a really long time, 12 seconds is the cooldown of, I think it's rank 3 Unraveled Earth. And so once you're at rank 3 Unraveled Earth, and anything beyond that, because I think like rank 1 is 16, then rank 2 is 14, rank 3 is 12. So as soon as you are at level 8, which is rank 2 of Unraveled Earth, you were actually blocked by Seismic Shove's cooldown being 16 seconds, because your E would be up and your W would not be. Now, ranks 2 and 3 of Unraveled Earth, and actually beyond, because W's cooldown remains lower, are essentially up more often because you have the Seismic Shove to trigger it more often. So this combo is actually now better for wave clear because it's up every 12 seconds instead of every 16 seconds. That can be a big deal. Now, I do want to point out Unraveled Earth did lose some base damage, 20-0 based on rank, and it's the ability you max second, so it's nerfed until level 13. What's weird, though, is they say trigger damage is unchanged. The trigger damage was listed as it was like 15 or 20% of the base damage, but being called unchanged makes me think there's actually just raw numbers back there that they're just enforcing instead of it being 15% now. I don't know for sure. That's my guess, though. Small nerf to Weaver's Wall. Anyway, I did run the numbers on W and E. Here you go. Right, again, the E damage is down up until level 13. The W cooldown is better up until level 18. End of the day, the damage output is going to be roughly similar. If she needs to use WE to wave clear, she can, and in fact can do it more frequently. She's got her crowd control and safety ability much more frequently. That's quite nice as well. Doesn't run around nearly as fast on worked ground because there isn't that move speed buff anymore. I'm actually glad they removed a move speed buff from the kit because I still have the one from the passive. Anyway, that's enough for Talia. I think she will probably end up on the weak side, and it will take time for people to learn the champion. Most notably, I don't think the E needed the nerf, but we'll see what happens. Maybe this thing ends up being a really big deal with the cooldown getting better and the Q cost going down. Maybe she's actually nuts in lane. Hard for me to know. Next up, buffs to Urgot. He is now a skinnier boy. He's gone on a diet or something. And his base attack speed went up by a little bit. Base attack speed buff is 5%, but goes up to 1 attack per second by the end of the game, which is kind of nice. The passive damage to monsters cap also went up at early levels by a pretty substantial amount. So now your auto attack does 60 plus 60 damage. So this should mean a lot actually for like killing chickens and stuff, because keep in mind you have like 5 of them to cast every 30 odd seconds at the beginning of the game, and these things doing 35 more damage 5 times is a lot of extra damage. So maybe Jungle Urgot becomes a thing. I mean, base attack speed is a really important jungle stat for obvious reasons. And yeah, I mean, this just seems really, really powerful. So maybe Jungle Urgot's good. Maybe it's not. There's a decent chance it's not, but still cool to see. Getting to cast W during your dash and stuff is a really good thing as well, since W, I believe, self-stuns for a little bit as you're casting it. And either way, as you're going in for the fling, you kind of want to turn on Purge. So these are all just straight buffs to Urgot. Urgot was already performing pretty well from what I could tell in solo queue, so I feel like Urgot is going to be like definitively strong. Even this thing matters as well, where he's actually allowed to move to position the fear a little bit better. Like, Urgot might end up being a top-tier top laner. And now I know it's going to require like pros to actually practice him, and I don't think people want to practice Urgot, but seeing buffs to almost everything he does is a really big deal. And I don't know, my instinct is this is enough to make top Urgot very good and jungle Urgot viable. That's my read on it. Next up is Victor, someone who lost power because he had a direct mana ratio on his shield. Also, he was a good Archangels user because, again, he had lots of mana ratios he cared about. And so he's getting 0 to 40 more damage on Q2, and R is getting a 0.1, which could be a 0.3 if you hit all the secondary storms. AP ratio increase. So let's look at that. Q2 damage, of course, it has to include an auto attack. I also chose to include the rank 1 hex core 1 AP per level because it has to exist for him in this damage as well, because it's honest, I guess. In the real world, of course, like he'll have more AP, but I tried to only include what you have to include. And you can see that, yeah, in the first 7 levels, this has no change at all. And so his laning phase is basically unaffected, but his mid to late game team fighting has 40 more base damage on it, which is a meaningful uptick. You definitely do notice like your Q2 when it gets up to 200 damage. That's where it starts to really, really matter. And so this right around level 13, you get some really meaningful chunks out. And that's kind of cool. It's a good, I like that Victor kind of power spikes in the mid game. It feels good. So these are good places. As far as Chaos Storm is concerned, this is the math assuming all 3 ticks of secondary are hit. This is pretty much the most generous sort of read on this. In the real world, you're not going to probably get all 3 ticks, and so the actual damage amp is going to be a bit lower. But at 100, 400, and 800 AP, it's a non-trivial damage increase. His ult does 4 to 8% more damage based on ability power. That's pretty good. Now, again, it'll be a little bit less than that in a lot of cases, but still quite good. He's got more damage, and Victor is the damage guy, so I like that quite a lot. Early nerfs to Xin Zhao. E slow a little bit weaker. This doesn't mean a lot because the E slow is only half a second long anyway, so it's not that big of a deal kind of regardless. The 0.3 AD per level doesn't mean all that much as well. You can see he goes down to 117, loses about 5 attack damage by the end of the game. Not that big of a deal. I mean, these are going to be small nerfs. Xin Zhao is definitely a very strong performer in solo queue. I mean, exceptionally strong. I don't think these nerfs are going to be enough to knock him out of being an S tier jungler in solo queue. But we even saw Xin Zhao get some play in pro as well, which is fine. I actually like that he's getting some play in pro. My nose is itching. It's really annoying, probably to me and you. He'll still be OP, or at least like on the very strong side. In my opinion, that means he's OP, but pick your words how you want. He'll be very, very good. Cool to see an extra quarter second on Zyver Root. I don't think she's that weak. I think she's pretty playable in bot lane support right now. But I guess they're just saying, hey, let's have her do a little bit more in the early game. That's fine with me. I think champion's already good. And Zyra support is one of my big supports, so cool. Next up, we get into the Marksman, specifically bot lane Marksman base stat adjustments. For example, Corki is unaffected because Corki is not a bot laner anymore. Quinn really either, and Graves, etc. Right? Those champions don't really play bot lane, so they're not included in this. So basically what happened is all these champions lost 4 attack damage and gained 0.7 attack damage per level. This breaks even and is a buff at level 13. Being a duo laner, level 13 comes very late into the game. A lot of games are decided before you hit level 13. In general, that change is a nerf to AD carries. Next, They're losing 5 armor, but gaining 6 health per level, and somewhere between 6 and 16 base health. Ashe gets 11, Caitlyn gets 6, Draven gets 16, Ezreal gets 6, Jhin gets 16, Jinx gets 16, Kai'Sa gets 16, Kalista gets 16, Kog'Maw gets 16, Lucian gets 16, Miss Fortune gets only 11, Sivir gets 16, Tristana gets 16, Twitch gets 16, Varus gets only 11, Vayne gets 16, and Xayah gets 16. Basically, if you're a poke monster, aka Caitlyn or Ezreal, you only got 6. And if you're kind of a poke monster, aka Varus, Ashe, and Miss Fortune, you only got 11. Everyone else got 16. You also saw health regen go down anywhere between 21 and 30 less health per minute. I like to count regen in terms of health per minute because that feels like numbers that we as players can actually appreciate. AD carries across the board get between 21 and 30 less health per minute. This puts almost all AD carries at the very close to bottom of the pile for health regen. Very few champions had as little as 1 health per second. This was like mini Gnar Soraka territory. Now all AD carries have less than 1 health per second. Now, to be fair, AD carries are one of the only classes in the game to always buy health regen at level 1. Mages buy Doran's Ring or Dark Seal. Some top laners would, get Corrupting Potion and Doran's Shield and all that, but AD carries always got a Doran's Blade or always got a Doran's Shield. So at the end of the day, they have inflated regen because Doran's Blade exists. Also, they run a keystone called Fleet Footwork, which is also a regen keystone that most other classes didn't run. You could argue that maybe they should have removed the healing from Fleet or nerfed the lifesteal from Doran's or done something else, but this is also, again, this is the kind of thing where even though I like clean numbers and I like consistency and it feels bad that Marksman kind of arbitrarily now have worst in-game health regen, nerfing Doran's Blade nerfs Fiora, and she doesn't necessarily need a laning phase nerf. And nerfing Fleet Footwork means that no one else can ever run Fleet Footwork, and that feels bad too. So they made the change that does the least damage to the game, even though now AD carries have unique health regen values, which again, I like clean numbers, but they're making the right design choice. So in the real world, I don't actually mind that this health regen is so abysmally terrible. I'll get over it, truly. Anyway, so as far as that health changes are concerned, I ran some numbers. So I chose Ezreal, the worst of the worst, only got 6 base HP right here. Well, it's 6 rounded up. If there was ever a fraction, the designers always rounded the health up. So Twitch got 16.92 health, for example, and Ezreal got 6.6 health, which is why this looks more like 7. So you can see that with that, plus the extra 6 health per level, you get a 1 to 6% bonus health. We start getting AD carries dangerously close to the 2,000 health mark, by the way. In my opinion, 2,000 health is too high for a ranged champion. Again, I like to think about base stats. I like to look at the numbers and say, hey, what feels fair, what doesn't. I think 2K is egregious for ranged. Ezreal's not there, but Draven probably breaches that mark pretty quickly. For reference, 2,000 is like the health Evelynn has at level 18. And is very squarely a melee champion. Anyway, not the end of the world. Okay, so let's compare, as my nose continues to itch, the base health values compared to the armor changing. And so, of course, down 5 armor flat puts you at 86 level 18, okay, whatever. And so I ran the numbers back through and said, let's look at your armor now and your health now versus your armor before and your health before. For Ezreal, who only got 6 health, he breaks even in physical durability by level 6. If you got 10 health, it breaks even much more quickly than that. I didn't run those numbers because it wasn't that big of a deal to look at a 10 base health difference because it's not that big of a deal. End of the day, though, what this means is AD carries got less overall health regen. Also, they have less overall armor, which means they are even less resilient to physical damage poke, which is part of why Ezreal only got 6 health and Draven got 16, because Ezreal pokes you with physical damage, which you need to regen. This seems fair at a certain point. But what's interesting is though they lost regen, they gained raw health, which makes them more durable against mages. Right? Their overall stat composition ends up putting them as more durable of champions, especially against magic damage. However, it does make them more pokey to auto attacks and thus minion aggro in the early game. And because their base health regen went down, but not their health regen scaling, so like this diminishes over time, they are just more pokeable overall. And again, I didn't actually look at like the raw numbers of like how long does it take for Ezreal to not have the regen to make up for the lost health and he got the more base health. But considering that the regen loss is between 21 to 30 health per minute, and the champion stat growth was 6 to 16 plus 6 per level, within a minute, you've lost 2 levels worth of health in health regen. So if your laning phase ever lasts more than a minute or two, you're actually behind in health. That's how that math works out. Okay, so we've done a whole lot of math there about all of this. End of the day, the changes aren't really that big, but it feels like these guys will be much more pokeable, and that's that. Later on in the patch notes, we're going to see that, what's it called? My brain will get there eventually. Fleet Footwork is receiving some nerfs in terms of the regen it gives to ranged champions while hitting minions. This means that you're probably going to see more Legend Bloodline. You might even see more Domination splashes for things like Taste of Blood. You might see more Resolve splashes for those health regen tools and damage mitigation tools, or people all get over it and they move on because at the end of the day, these changes are probably not big enough to heavily shape player behavior. What I do want to point out, and this is something I talked about in I think the 8.9 rundown, is one of the things the designers tried to do when they were trying to figure out, can we make mages work in the bottom lane? And I remember talking about this in the 8.8 or 8.9 rundown, is they tested, there were 2 big hypotheses they tested. One of which is, are AD carries, conventional marksmen, mandatory to win late game team fights? That answer ended up being no. The no marksman double mage teams ended up being just fine. So late game power seemed to be totally reasonable. The other hypothesis, though, was you can't beat AD carries in lane. They're just too good. That one ended up being true. It was very hard to win lane on any mage basically not named Ziggs. Being that AD carries lost 4 AD, they lost some armor, they lost some health regen. Generally speaking, they are going to be less good as fighters. Generally speaking, you can now more reliably poke them out because they have one less regen tool, which is average health regen. They still have Fleet, they still have Doran's Blade, they still have the chance to go Doran's Shield, they still might have a Soraka in their lane, but maybe you can poke them out now. And so this is what basically designers said was, this is enough to actually make the laning phase bearable for Cassiopeia in the bot lane. This will notably have an impact on, let's say, Lucian mid, who is notably a lane bully and got one of the bigger health regen nerfs. But end of the day, him losing armor and gaining health tends to make him a better anti-mage. So look, there's going to be a bunch of knock-on effects at the end of the day, and it's really hard to get into what it's going to mean for everyone at the end of all of it. But again, AD carry is going to end up more durable. They're going to be weaker laners, and because also more of their power is in scaling, in health scaling and whatnot, there is actually more incentive to run a marksman in the mid lane because their stat composition is better against mages, and their damage growth and health growth being so nice, they actually care a little bit more about levels than they used to. I spent a lot of time talking about this. Again, it's all just going to be sort of forward thinking. Maybe it works this way. Minor stat changes to Master Yi and Nocturne. Generally speaking, the bonus attack speed at cost of attack damage, I believe is going to end up being DPS positive in the jungle. Keep in mind, 2 of 68 is like 3%-ish, and 8% is 8%. It's pretty much impossible for this not to be a DPS increase. Actually, I guarantee this is a DPS increase. I would bet you like 90-1 odds this is a DPS increase. I'm very confident that this is it. So these guys are going to clear the jungle faster. Congratulations. They'll even duel better in the early and mid game, which is kind of fun as well. Diana's getting it just on her E passive because YOLO. She ended up being someone who was hurt a little bit by the Machete changes. And for the most part, these are actually not really meant to be power changes as much as field changes because attack speed is a really good feeling stat, and having attack speed makes you feel better about clearing the jungle. Okay, let's move on to the second part of the Giant Marksman updates. There's a bunch of new attack damage items, and I want to be very clear, this is not just a Marksman item update. A lot of these items are going to be bought by attack damage assassins. This is a really big deal for Pyke, who funnily enough now exists, but also Talon and Zed, and maybe even a little bit of Yasuo. Okay, So, Storm Razor is now a thing. It's attack damage and attack speed, which is a new stat composition other than like Blade of the Ruin King. What's cool is attack damage and attack speed are the only two stats that affect turrets outside of, I guess, Armor Pen. I think still affects turrets. It got added and removed and added again, I think, at some point. I think it's still in the game. Either way, that's cool. Your big stack will critically strike and give you attack speed. That's kind of fun. But it always feels good when AD assassins have items that actually hit turrets, and this is that. Essentially, this is an item that comes in and says, okay, I smack you once, let's brawl a little bit. Your next basic attack will critically strike, give you move speed, and deal some bonus damage. That's really cool. So it's a chunk. It's basically a sheen for champions who don't really want to buy sheen. And what's cool is being 160% of your total attack damage means it scales better than sheen and Trinity Force. And in fact, if you do happen to buy some crit at, what is it, 20 something percent, at 60% critical strike chance, which is basically 2 Zeal upgrades, it now crits for 200% attacks, for 200%. So it's a full crit. Great. Congratulations. And you get some move speed to kite with. So it's like a way to hit and then like come up with somebody. So if you like Z, R, and then auto attack, you can keep up, and that's kind of cool. Either way, the item is gold efficient at exactly 100%, so that's kind of nice. And it has a nice little auto crit passive. This feels like a pretty good mid-game item that you can buy on an assassin to get an extra chunk of damage. You get 60% of your total AD once per fight, basically, and some move speed to come after, which feels good. I don't see myself buying it on a conventional marksman because I don't really see why I would. But I guess if you're not running fleet, but you still want the move speed, you can run this and it gives you the fleet move speed. Whew. Now it's time for the big item update. Infinity Edge is getting a huge rebuild. No longer has base crit, no longer has crit damage. Instead, it doubles your crit chance and converts 50% of critical strike damage to true damage. Okay, pop quiz. How much armor does your target need to have for a 15% crit strike damage converted to true conversion to be better than simply crits do 25% more damage than they used to? Because keep in mind, going from 2x to 2.5x is doing 25% more than what it was, right? 200 becomes 250. That's 1.25x the damage. So your crits went from being a 25%, well, Infinity Edge went from crits are 25% more effective to crits are 15% true damage now. Everyone, pop quiz, how much armor does your target need to have for this to be a buff? For this unique passive specifically to be better? That number is 166.66666 armor. There's your conversion. I chose to do better/worse instead because YOLO. So this means that if the rest of the Infinity Edge were kept the same, if it was still the same AD, the same gold cost, the same critical strike chance, it would be a better tank killer. It is almost impossible for anyone who's not trying really hard to get up to 167 armor. Because like a mage with Zonia's goes up to like 130 at level 18. Zonia's and Ninja Tabby is 150. So Infinity Edge is definitively, at least for so far, worse against squishies. Now let's look at the next thing. Okay, so we mathed it out, right? The item costs more, but has more attack damage. And in fact, 10 AD is worth roughly 300 golds. That's cool. But instead of giving you crit chance, it doubles your crit chance. Which, hey, to be fair, if this is better after we're at 166 armor, and this is just a value positive situation, then as long as I'm doubling my crit strike chance at more than 20%, this is a better tank busting item. Now, of course, if I'm hitting a non-tank, then this is a worse proposition because this was better against the non-tanks in the team, which is most champions. You're typically not seeing 3-tank teams in your games in solo queue. Anyway, let's look at gold efficiency real quick. So again, this, what I did here, by the way, is a 50% crit damage is essentially the same thing as 50% more crit chance. It's very clever because instead of being 50% more crit chance, it's 100% more crit chance. How fun is that? Either way, though, what this is I said, okay, well, here's attack damage, here's crit strike, here's how gold efficient the item is. And then if I only had 20% crit chance, it's this much value. If I had 50% crit chance, like i.e. plus a completed shiv or something, it's this much gold value. If I had 2 fully upgraded zeal items, it's this much gold value. And we can see the extra efficiency that you can see here. So instead, I looked at this guy and said, okay, well, the item by itself is clearly inefficient, 76%, not great, 3,700 gold for 2,800 gold worth of AD, clearly not a good item. Yes, we understand that. But if I'm doubling 15% crit, then, well, I get 600 gold back of crit chance. If I'm doubling 30% crit, like an upgraded Zeal item, then I'm getting this much gold value. And if I'm adding that last 40% crit chance because I've grabbed the 2 fully upgraded Zeal items, I'm getting this much gold value. And so you can kind of see how the numbers feed back in, and that clearly at a certain point, 43% more gold efficiency, yep, this is becoming gold efficient, and that's even before we include the new extra exciting unique passive. That might not have made sense to a lot of you guys. What it comes down to is this item is good once you have static shift. Against tanks. Against non-tanks, again, we looked at the value of the unique passive, and it's hard to say in some cases. Okay, let's move forward. Actually, to talk about one more thing, I did one more piece of number. There's no graph on the sheet, but I wrote it down in my notes. If your build is, for example, Infinity Edge plus Hurricane, right? That's my build. I have those 2 items, and I'm going to fight you. Which build is better, pre-patch or post-patch Infinity Edge Hurricane? Well, if my target has at least 80 armor, new IE Hurricane is better with my 60% crit chance and true damage conversion and all that fun stuff, right? I have 60% crit chance. I convert into true damage. All that's exciting versus the old version, which is 50% crit chance, but had crit damage on it, but no conversion. If I did my math right, and I've done my math wrong pretty frequently, actually. I've gone back and redone a lot of these over the course of the last week or so. After my targets have 80 armor, new IE Hurricane is better. The caveat, though, is that this new build is 600 gold more expensive because both the Infinity Edge costs 300 more gold and new Hurricane and everything else costs 300 more gold. There's also 10 more attack damage in this build, so that compensates for some of it, but that's where a lot of these numbers lie. Okay, hopefully this all made sense. Now, I think Essence Reaver is out of order here, but we're going to go into Essence Reaver next. Essence Reaver is now a non-crit caster item. So it's still 10 CDR with Warfield's Call Hammer. It is still that same 70 attack damage, but it now has mana on it. At least it has a Sapphire Crystal. I assume there's actually mana on the item. I actually haven't checked in PvE if it does, but there's certainly mana restore. I'm going to assume there's mana on the item. Thing is, I actually forgot about that when I did my notes here. So here's the item efficiency, not counting mana in it, and it's not great because turns out Crit Strike is a pretty good stat. Even though it's cheaper, it's still not very efficient, but it gives you some really good things. It gives you 30% attack speed when you ultimate, which is worth 750 gold, which immediately pops it up to being gold efficient again for that bit of time. And it also gives you cooldown restore. Every auto attack you land refunds 20% of your remaining non-ultimate cooldowns, as long as you cast your ultimate more than 30 seconds apart from the last time you did it. With Lucian, this has some really insane stuff because he auto attacks twice. With Kale, this feels pretty good because actually, I don't know if it really will, because Kale has a short cooldown ultimate and auto attacks a lot, and then can put her Q back up and put her W back up, which can be useful. But okay, it probably is a bad Kale item. Let's walk that one back. But I don't know off the top of my head what the really great choices are going to be, what the really good uses of new Essence Reaver are going to be outside of the obvious case of Lucian. But if you find yourself, like, let's say you're playing Talon and you go in for the team fight and you press R and then you auto attack and you Q and you auto attack and you land some more buttons, you might find that your Q comes up much more quickly and this feels really good. It is still a 10 CDR 70 attack damage item. That is on par with all the other big lethality items. It doesn't give lethality, it just gives you cooldown restore. And it gives you some attack speed, which again, attack speed really is a good stat for Assassin. This is hard to find attack speed on good items. The only attack speed items that really exist in the game either have crit on them or they're essentially on hit items. Having good attack damage, attack speed items could just be what fighters really want. Darius likes attack speed, Fiora likes attack speed, Talon likes attack speed, Zed likes attack speed. Like, there is value in having attack speed on these items, and so this could be very good. All right. Moving on, more mostly assassin-focused item updates. This does affect what AD carries buy and when they buy it. Keep in mind their new Infinity Edge is an anti-tank item because of the true damage conversion. And so now the bonus armor pen items become total armor pen. So 35% bonus armor becomes 10% total armor penetration. So I ran the math on this. At what point is Last Whisper better or worse than before? Now I chose a slightly egregious value. If your champion's base armor is 100, which is a bit high to be fair, Last Whisper is worse at 100 base armor plus 40 purchased armor, which is basically they bought a Zhonya's or a Guardian Angel. That's when 35 bonus armor becomes the same as 10% total armor. So if they buy a Zhonya's or a Guardian Angel, Last Whisper is now worse than before as its own standalone item. And of course, the more and more armor you buy, the more and more you're missing out on this stat right here. Now, if you find your opponents are not buying anything at all, if they're going full try-hard Janna and they've gotten themselves their cooldown boots and their Majai's Soul Stealer and they're buying Ardent Sensor and then they're going to buy Redemption afterwards and they've still not bought any armor, at least Last Whisper does something to the champion, but is worse against tanks in basically all cases. So Last Whisper is going to be a very bad item to sit on by itself, because you didn't sit on it before very often, and you're really not going to do it now. 10% armor pen is still not a bad overall stat. It's, like a 4% damage amp in some cases, but probably not worth the slot in and of itself in most cases. That's fine. It builds into other items. So now we look at Lord Dominic's Regards. Costs 200 more gold, has 10 less attack damage. That feels pretty bad, but the bonus armor pen becomes total armor pen. Oh yeah, and it also lost the up to 20% damage amp against champions with more health than you, which of course could be a big deal and sometimes wasn't. So let's talk about Lord Dominic's now. And I chose a more reliable base armor, which was 75. I figure by the time you buy Lord Dominic's, champions are going to be around level, let's say 12 going up there, and like a pretty standard, like level 15 or 16 champion has 75 base armor. That's like pretty standard. So that's the number I chose, and let's go for it. And so I said, okay, well, what is your target's armor, assuming their base is 75, meaning 75 plus 0, 75 plus 25, all the way up to 75 plus 20, or 275 plus 275. So, the very big tanks are down here at the bottom. We said, okay, well, in 8.10, this was how good the armor pen version or portion of Lord Dominic's was. Obviously, it did nothing if you didn't buy armor, and it was up to a 27% damage amp against the high armor targets. Now, this, of course, does not include the health conversion, because that was not always 2,000 health off. Keep in mind, again, 80 carries scale up to like 1,900 health or so, and not all tanks went to 3,900 health. It was very easy to say, my 20% damage amp, but it was not always a 20% damage amp. Also keep in mind, every time you fought another AD carry, or a support like Tarek, or the jungle Graves, you did not get very much out of Lord Dominic's health conversion, nor did you get anything out of the armor pen as well. Truly, Lord Dominic's became a much more generalist item. Also, because you're not relying on the health difference, you can now buy it in mid lane and not feel like you're trolling, because mid laners gain more health because they level up more than a bot lane, and thus you shot yourself in the foot. So I am glad that this is gone, because it honestly was pretty janky. So the other half of this, though, is what the damage amp is now, considering that it now counts base armor. And at level 1, or at 0 bonus armor, it is an 18% damage amp against just a generic squishy. Lord Dominic's is now a generic 18% physical damage amp. And of course, it goes up from there. It goes up against a tank to a 37% damage amp. This is interesting. Lord Dominic's becomes twice as good against tanks as it is against squishies. That feels fair. That seems reasonable. I feel like that's things that I would expect to have happen, but it's kind of worth noting that it is only ever twice as good. Of course, the attack damage is the same, and that's kind of, 40 AD is 40 AD at all times. But the unique passive really only ever gets to being twice as good. That means his item, you compare to this, where it does literally nothing, or it does 27% damage amp. This is much sharper. Old Lord Dominic's was a much sharper anti-tank item. New Lord Dominic's is an item that is good against tanks, but pretty passable against squishes as well. Now again, you're still spending a lot of money on the unique passive. 40 attack damage can be built as a BF sword essentially, and only costs 1,300 gold. So you're paying roughly twice that for an 18 to 37% damage amp, which again, totally worth it, but pointing that out. Okay, so we've done that. Giant Slayer's now gone because there's nothing for it to build into anymore, and it doesn't do anything anymore, so that's fine. And now Mortal Reminder is a new item. It's been replaced. It keeps the healing reduction on it. It's also getting nerfed to 40 AD and nerfed by 200 gold. And it's also doing total armor pen, but it's now slightly weaker total armor pen. And I like this change a lot because it's going to make people consider a little bit more about whether or not they want to actually buy the correct item here and buy a Mortal Reminder against champions like Dr. Mundo. Do you want 35 total armor pen, or do you want 25 total armor pen and a healing reduction? This ends up being a really exciting assassin item. This is actually one of my favorite items from the item update because it's very sharply an assassin item. Hey, you're playing Zed and getting cucked by Janna Ultimate or Soraka heals all the time. Wouldn't it be nice to get to build Grievous Wounds and have it still be good against squishies? Welcome to Mortal Reminder, where we can compare the old Mortal Reminder, which sucked all the time against squishies and now doesn't. It is a 12 to 24% damage amp against squishy to tanky targets, instead of being a 0 to 27% damage amp eventually against tanky targets. And keep in mind, the vast majority of champions have less than 250 armor, where it does more damage than before. So Mortal Reminder has now joined the assassin item pool. No, it is not quite as good as Lord Dominik's, which is an 18 to 37 instead of a 12 to 24. That is a difference, to be clear. Of course it is. But the 6% damage difference is probably not going to make up for freaking Grievous Wounds being good. Because let's keep in mind, right? 6% of your damage goes missing because of this item. Unless the champion heals for less than 6% of their max health, this is still the right item to buy, right? You go and try to kill a 2,000 health Ashe. If she ever heals for more than 120, or rather, you can Grievous Wounds 120 health off the kit, aka heal for 240, which literally Summoner Heal does that, as does Fleet Footwork with one auto attack against a champion. Mortal Reminder is now the right choice, and I love that you can actually compare the items more cleanly to one another. This is slightly stronger at the thing you already do, but again, a 6% damage difference is never going to be better than healing reduction against the right targets. You now have no excuse for not going Mortal Reminder in the right games. Don't be bad. It also means, by the way, that Lord Dominik's probably shows up in every endgame build that you can come up with, because again, turns out it's really hard to find a multiplicative 20% damage amp. That's hard to find. 100 armor is 20% damage amp. Good luck finding that. That's really good. That's as good as Infinity Edge's unique passive when you had 80 crit chance. That's really hard to find. So Lord Dominik's is basically Infinity Edge. Not really, don't get ahead of yourselves. But that's what I'm kind of talking about here, okay? That's really, really good. My nose still itches. All right, next things up. They nerf Brawlers of Gloves to cost 200 more gold and remove Cloak of Agility. I like removing component items whenever it makes sense to. I like cleaning up the item shop. It's a good thing. Makes me happy. Good to see it. They're also nerfing the crap out of crit chance overall as a thing. I'm running these numbers, by the way, assuming the old gold value of crit chance. Otherwise, it would just kind of be really weird and janky. So old Zeal was 15 attack speed, 20 crit, and 5 move speed, and ended up being nuts good efficient. Because this is what move speed costs as a stat. I'm pretty confident in my numbers here. Old Zeal was stupidly efficient, and it's why building Zeals was very good. This item was actually insane. Now, Zeals are only slightly inefficient, and really only because they're kind of, well, no, this is still considering the old 400 gold is 10 crit chance numbers. Considering that 600 gold is 4 crit chance, Zeal is still kind of efficient, but I'm still comparing the numbers to the old numbers because I think that's the fair thing to do in this case. If just this change to Zeal were slapped onto Live out of nowhere, it would be a slightly inefficient item and all that stuff. I do want to point out, by the way, that we are definitely in a world now where crit is not worth splashing. If you consider crit and compare it to attack speed, right, they both multiply your total attack damage in some way. You can buy a dagger and get 12% more damage for 300 gold. And to be fair, that is deflated because the more attack speed you buy, the less like the less percentage value more attack speed has. But like if you have 100% bonus attack speed, like you ran precision, you got legend alacrity, you're level 18, you're playing as Kennen, you're still getting 6% bonus damage for 300 gold by buying a dagger. And so if we extrapolate that up to what a Brawler's Glove does, you are getting 12% more damage for 600 gold. A Brawler's Glove is 10% more damage for 600 gold. So even if you are at 100% bonus attack speed from your other sources, a dagger is still a more gold efficient way to increase DPS than a Brawler's Gloves. Now, there's one thing that I'm not accounting for, which is that alpha striking or bursting matters, right? So some things, of course, scale with crit and don't scale with attack speed, such as, well, Master Yi's Q, in the very specific case of literally alpha strike. But some things do scale with attack speed, like, his passive actually does anyway, and his Q restore does, so, there's things that push it back. But just the simple fact of bursting in and of itself matters, because if you burst them, they die and can't fight back. Now, if you get unlucky with crit, you lose out. Of course, this kind of goes both ways. But generally speaking, it's actually fair to say that burst matters, and having RNG burst is generally a positive thing, even above what a standard DPS check might tell you. And I think that's actually reasonably fair. But again, I just want to really point out that even at 100% bonus attack speed from other sources, daggers are still more gold efficient for raw DPS than crit is. So what I'm really saying is crit is not a good stat to splash. It doesn't do much to just splash some crit chance in there, because you're going to spend a lot for not that much gain. You're going to get more DPS buying attack speed and probably just even buying raw attack damage. Keep in mind that a lot of champions end at like 100 base AD or close to that, and you can get 10% bonus damage for 350 gold. You could be up to like 175 total attack damage, and a dagger will still be as efficient as Brawler's Gloves. Okay, let's now move on. Rapid Fire Cannon, Static Shiv, Rune Changes, Hurricane, Phantom Dancer, all getting 200 gold more expensive. Well, Phantom Dancer is getting 200 gold more expensive. These are getting 300 gold more expensive. Let's run the numbers. Rapid Fire Cannon wasn't gold efficient before, and it really isn't gold efficient now. You are spending a lot on the trigger, and it is why I am so freaking tilted when I see people go Essence Reaver, Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon. And they did that a lot throughout MSI because pros suck at theory crafting and suck at math. Rapid Fire Cannon didn't even give you more trigger damage. It gave you range on an auto attack and was 425 gold inefficient. Ugh, pros suck at math. You should buy a BF sword and a red elixir 100% of the time instead of going towards Rapid Fire Cannon. Pros suck at math. Okay. Rapid Fire Cannon, even less efficient, of course. From 8.12 onwards, I will put in the new sort of cost of crit chance. But until then, I'm using these numbers. And yeah, you aren't going to feel really good about these items by themselves. It's just not going to feel that good. Buying Rapid Fire Cannon first item is not a lot of stats. It's really, really not a lot of stats. And you're really going to want to consider, like, if I want to go for an actual crit build, or if I want to be Jhin and say, you know what, screw it, let's go for a freaking high attack damage lethality armor pen build, because Lord Dominik's is a great third item now. That's going to happen a lot. Also, you have items like Blade of the Rune King and Bloodthirster that are a bit more efficient by 200 gold. This ends up being really, really nice. Most of Blade of the Rune King's value, by the way, is in the actual current health damage trigger here. So here's the stats, right? Very inefficient on itself. In this case still, but considering 8% of someone's current HP, like if they have 1,000 current HP, you are doing 80 damage on hit. That is a lot of damage on hit. 80 damage is a lot of damage. What I chose here was 750 for the current health, and then said, okay, but the on-hit damage is worth half value or something like that. Or, no, I didn't say that. I just said your target has 1,500 health and it's half value, or it's 750 health and full value. Either way, the full value of Blade of the Rune King is in the on-hit damage thing. And considering I think we're going to see more attack damage attack speed builds, we might just see Blade of the Rune King show up. This item I think is criminally undervalued and still is, and I'm going to buy a lot of Blade of the Rune King next patch. It even has synergy with Essence Reaver because Essence Reaver gives you attack speed and wants you to attack quickly and then like cast your spells afterwards. And so like these like hybrid caster AD carries are going to get a lot out of Blade of the Ruin King, Essence Reaver, maybe a Bloodthirster, Lord Dominic, some lethality, all of that stuff. Going to be really, really strong. Bloodthirster itself, quite gold efficient. Now, even without the Overshield is gold efficient. This is a really good item. 80 attack damage and 20 lifesteal is very, very good. Again, keep in mind, I still love Blade of the Rune King. I think it's an incredible item, and so still worth buying. Update to Maw of Mortius, basically. Gave it 5 MR and made the shield not scale anymore. Doesn't really matter. Technically, the item only gave 345 shield unless you had bonus MR somewhere else, which a lot of champions didn't have. Maybe with Merc Treads, but if they didn't, it didn't go anywhere. So it's technically a bit more gold efficient. Obviously, the shield, really, really quite valuable. Worth a lot of health, worth a lot of gold if it can actually block you some damage. Also, an update to Guardian Angel. Generally speaking, 10 armor is not worth 400 gold. Also, keep in mind, 80 carries lost 5 base armor. Now, they get it back and then some with GA, but it costs them 400 more gold. So, in a lot of cases, they are squishier against these kinds of champions. But either way, here is Guardian Angel after the fact. You really, really want to have the Revive passive, which you totally do to get, half your health back and on that, long-ass cooldown, still quite good. Yeah, still a good item. Still a good item. But yeah, they wanted you to be able to sit on a chain vest while you're building up to it, which I think feels really good. Sitting on cloth armor feels pretty bad for 2,000 gold. So, okay. That's cool. Thanks, Guardian Angel. That's kind of nice. Banner of Command update. I think this is actually a well-designed update. Loses some free stats. The minion is no longer immune to magic damage. It just takes a lot less damage from champions overall. And then there's some cool usability updates. You can see floating combat numbers. It's bigger on the mini-map. Tooltip's written a bit better. And the funny thing is, Banner of Command was already stupidly gold efficient. As long as you cared about health regen as a stat, which to be fair, a lot of champions really kind of did. I mean, Scion cares about health regen. He's a melee champion. Takes damage in lane. So he gets to keep, all those stats, but now it's just no longer over 100% gold efficient because the CDR is gone. And what's kind of nice as well is as a rush item, it giving you armor and MR is almost always guaranteed to be inefficient because how could you really have to care about both those stats? So in the real world, that's kind of nice. This item is actually quite a bit inefficient now. Has to be worth getting the promote active and the point runner passive. And I actually like that it's now good against. It's pretty good against all champions, opposed to being dumb against mages. I think it's really, really good. This is another buff that, by the way, helps you play more mages in your team comps. My nose is so freaking itchy. It's insane. It's another buff that helps mages fit in team comps. You can send your Vladimir to a bot lane and not just die to a Banner of Command. So I'm kind of happy about that as well. You can actually slowly kill it over time, which is cool. So that's kind of good stuff. Speaking of Vladimir, Shirelia's Reverie. Getting more expensive, getting less move speed, getting a worse active cooldown, but some mana regen on it. So as far as actual gold efficiency is concerned, the mana regen is actually pretty nice. This makes it now gold efficient for supports who need or care about the mana regen. Generally speaking, I've found that, it's pretty easy to care about mana regen, especially when you're playing something like Sona, maybe even Taric. That's a bit of a stretch, but it is pretty easy to spam mana for a very long time on a Sona or a Soraka or something. So it's kind of nice to see that right here. Obviously, it is quite a bit weaker for a Vladimir. If you're Vladimir, it's more expensive, it gives you less move speed, and it has a worse cooldown. This item is probably still worth buying on Vladimir despite these 3 nerfs. You could ignore the mana regen, doesn't matter. Still probably worth buying on the champion. It was bought first 100% of the time. It is now a little bit less good. It will still be bought by Vladimir players. I am pretty confident in that. And I actually do think it's a good choice the way they rebalance this because it's still going to be fine in Vladimir, and it's going to be more enticing for for other champions to actually buy the item itself. This seems quite good. I'm glad this exists this way. We should be seeing more overall of the item. Next up, a buff to Runic Echoes. It just gets 20 more AP. This makes this item, it also has a better, instead of being Lost Chapter in gold, it's Fiendish Codex and Mana Crystal, which is generally speaking a better build path. Fiendish Codex is a great item to sit on. Overall, this is going to end up being a buff to the item. So I actually looked at the numbers from 8.9, 8.10, and 8.11. I know some of these numbers are off the screen because I'm bad. Basically, it used to give AP and move speed, and then it gave AP, mana, and CDR. Now it gives more AP and mana and CDR. Essentially, it just gives, even if you don't care about the mana literally at all. This item is 107% gold efficient just for the ability power. And keep in mind, it also gives CDR. So this item has an absolutely insane amount of gold value worth of raw stats. And the way I'm doing the math, by the way, is saying, well, you're already going to pick up your red or green, or your red or blue smite. So to go from the smite to the completed item costs you 1625. And instead of getting 1620 worth of ability power and move speed, you're getting basically 2,000 gold worth of ability power and CDR. At a certain point, Runic Echoes is just better than it was before. And I think that point is now. Runic Echoes is an incredibly, incredibly good item. Now, to be fair, I mean, so is freaking Warrior Enchant. Warrior is like 60 attack damage, and the cost is still only 1625. Like that's similarly gold efficient. Runic Echoes is basically now Warrior tier of gold efficiency and how many stats it gives you. Oh, it also gives you CDR, by the way. And in Runic Echoes cases, it also just gives you mana, by the way. Congratulations, here's some free mana. Mage Jungler should be very happy about this. This is a very, very strong item now. Okay, so we're now to the second round of sustain nerfs for Marksman in the bot lane so that mages can lane against them in that bottom lane. A little bit less haste. Okay, whatever. Fleet Footwork goes down. A little bit more power to mages. But now ranged champions only heal for 20% instead of 30% against minions. So 1/3 of the sustain is gone from Fleet Footwork. About 1/3 of your health regen was gone from your base stats. About 1/10 of your physical durability is gone from your armor going down. All that matters. So, okay, Fleet Footwork nerfs, that's fine. Better for melee, though, which is kind of cool. Tryndamere actually has more that he can do, and this feels like the kind of buff that like lets you play Yasuo in the bot lane as my nose continues to itch. Yasuo basically has 2/3 more health coming back from Fleet Footwork. So Yasuo can try to play bot lane against a guy with 5 less armor, get more healing, the opponent gets less healing, the Zyra support can help cover your landing phase a little bit to poke them off when you go for CS, and cool. Maybe Yasuo can work now in the bot lane. That's that kind of stuff. Also, Tryndamere, of course, is a better landing phase up top as he heals off minions, with disdain for any kind of poke, and that can all feel wonderful. Keep in mind, though, you no longer heal on crit, so you're going to lose some teamfight sustain. That's going to happen. Oh well. New keystone for the domination tree looks pretty cool, though. Hail of Blades. Get a bunch of bonus attack for the first 3 attacks. It's basically inverse lethal tempo. This seems pretty cool, honestly. It also comes back really, really quickly. This is the other part I was talking about with the Storm Razor up here that gave you like a crit on your first attack. You've now got crit on first attack plus the move speed, and then chunk, like, you get attack speed for your next few hits. This again, attack speed does have good affinity with attack damage assassins because they have so much AD. They just need to get to use it some, and Halo Blades lets you do that. This seems really, really good. I imagine this is also quite nice if you were to try to play things like this could be good on Vayne somehow. It could be good on Echo somehow, just getting those attacks out. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. This could be a good thing on Kennen somehow, right? You get in there and you get your attacks off. This could be really good on Twitch. You open up the ultimate and get your attacks out really, really quickly. There's a lot of possible uses for Halo Blades that maybe you just want that burst. It's basically inverse electrocute, which, seems cool. The math, by the way it works out is it's worth roughly, actually, I didn't actually run the math, but it should be worth like roughly 1 or more total attack damage multiplied by your crit, because you'll essentially get a free attack off at some point. As a result of these changes, you'll get up to 1 free attack off over this duration. And that's really good because your 1 attack could be worth a lot of damage. And it could be worth more than Electrocute would have been. It could have been worth more than Press the Attack could have been worth. And if you have something like, Twitch or Callista that have a back end, like something that matters at the end of your auto attacks, like Rend and Expunge, or Contaminate, whatever, this ends up being your best in slot keystone. So there's a lot of promise here with Halo Blades. Next up, a cool thing. Ultimate Hat is now in the domination tree. Roughly the same scaling. I actually like that it exists in this form. This actually seems pretty good. This is probably going to be an auto include in like ARAM for what that's worth. because I think it's like the most ubiquitously good. There's a really good chance Ultimate Hunter is like best in slot Hunter Keystone now, or Hunter Rune, I should say. That's fine if it's true. I think it'll just get buffed or nerfed as needed afterwards, but there's a really good reason to go Domination Secondary now. Also, keep in mind that this is has cool synergy with new Essence Reaver, because keep in mind Essence Reaver has a 30-second baked-in cooldown. And so if you're Lucian and you can get your ultimate down from 60 to about 30 seconds, now every ult is up more often and triggers Essence Reaver and lets you go into that combat pattern. So now every fight all the time, even in just like the lane, you just ult in lane, or you ult at the start of every team fight and then blast people, and then by the time the fight's over, maybe it's back up. Maybe you have more reason to go Domination Secondary on Lux. Of course, you're going to run Ultimate Hat before anyway, but now you can run Nullifying Orb, or you can run Mana Flow Band, because those compete, I'm 99% certain, because Ultimate Hat, or your ultimate cooldown buff, is no longer taking up a very, very powerful slot in the sorcery tree. Cool, this seems pretty strong. I like it a lot. I'm going to try Domination a lot more on these champions. It is going to be harder to trigger, by the way. It's generally easier to cast your ult 5 times and to get assists on everybody. So it is powered down compared to Ultimate Hat, but I think that part of the Domination tree was weak anyway. So it still could be a buff to that row. Next up is Sorcery. Here is the Ultimate Hat replacement right after you cast your ultimate. And by the way, it always includes like the end of the channel. So for example, if you run this on Shen, you get the move speed after you finish the blink. If you run it on Karthus, you get it after you finish the channel. Now, Karthus, half the time, ults while dead, so you're not going to run it on Karthus. But maybe as Lux, you ult and then run forward. Maybe as Xerath, you end your ult and run forward for a stun. As Echo, you ult back in place. Now you've got a surge of movement speed to get somewhere. You're playing literally Singed, and it's like exactly the thing you want. This is a 6 Singed rune. Keep in mind that Singed runs sorcery anyway. Now, this fights Mana Flow Band, which doesn't care about too much, but it does fight Nullifying Orb, which it does care about. But, oh well, now we can't run that anymore. Also, very interestingly, it's affected by CDR, which is cool. I don't know if it's specifically affected by this guy. Actually, it wouldn't. It could matter, because you can get to the part where you kind of screw yourself, but this has some really, really good users. Really, really good users out there. It is, again, coded to be generous to the champions using it. I'm excited to use this rune. It seems like a really good rune. And a big nerf to Minion Dematerializer. It is slower by, what is this, 85 seconds? 85 seconds is basically 3 waves. Am I right with it being 85 seconds? Yes. 85 seconds is 3 waves. Basically, it means that this is up at second cannon instead of first cannon. That's the nerf. You don't get to auto-push your first cannon wave. But otherwise, it's, yeah. You miss your first cannon that way. You have to last at your first cannon. Of course, normally you would like dematerialize the first cannon. The next wave you get rid of a melee minion. The next wave you get rid of a caster minion. The next wave you get rid of another cannon. Right, you would just do that, and you'd have damage buffs against everything, and then you just move on and just keep last hitting cannons with this thing. So you're going to miss out on your 4% damage amp to your wave. That's going to be delayed by 3 waves. So yeah, your wave is going to be down in the early mid game. You know, you're like level 3, 4, 5 are going to be worse for wave clear. End of the day, though, still going to be a good rune. I think it's still going to be played a little bit, but it now has more competition against free boots, which seems fine. Next up, really cool change. I like this actually. Turrets at Inhibitor and especially at Nexus, much more frail. I'm actually very glad Nexus turrets are much, much more frail, because Nexus turrets didn't need to be that hard to kill. The goal seems to be, by the way, especially when you consider like the changes to Rift Herald, the changes to Baron Nashor, and some of those are later on in the patch as well. It seems to be their goal is to say, hey, if you're going to win the game, just win already. Like, yes, epic comebacks are cool, and they still happen sometimes, but like, if the game is 90% over, let's not have it take 7 minutes to end. Let's have it take 2 minutes to end, because it's 90% over. And yeah, 90% might become 95% over, but like, who cares? They were going to surrender it anyway, right? It's like, it's fine. I think it's a good change that you're not stuck in trapped games. And it's kind of nice because so I'm someone who does not like to surrender, right? I think that like you can be down 6 to 18 in kills and I will play on. I know a lot of you hate that. You're those guys who surrender at 15 because you're down 6 kills. I dislike that. I don't go for those unanimous surrenders. That's me as a player. That's you as a player. This is where we stand. I'm hoping, though, that this can ever so slightly shape player behavior. Because if a surrender vote fails, but you lose in 3 minutes anyway, you don't feel quite so much like you need to surrender, right? Surrender exists because games are over without being over. And wouldn't it be nice if when games are over, they actually end, and now surrendering is not this big, like, 8-minute time save. It's at best a 2-minute time save, and at that point, you might as well just play the freaking game. Because if you lose a team fight and lose your base anyway, at least you played League of Legends. You didn't just, like, tilt split push the entire time. So that's, like, my hopeful dream, is that when games are over, they actually end, right? Your opponents take Baron, they push down mid, your turrets die in 3 seconds, and it's just over. And you tried your best, but it ended at 22 minutes. I'm fine with that. If that was going to be the 4-1 surrender vote, but instead we play it out and we lose, that's cool. We played it out. And so with Rift Herald being better, and with like other bits of snowballing being better, like more individual gold snowballing, turrets falling a little bit faster, I think that's a good thing for the game. So that's cool. As far as this is concerned, inhibitor turrets. I guess Nexus turrets already regen 3 health per second, I'm pretty sure. But basically now, this is a really cool change as well. I like this as well, is now pushing and only getting 1/3 or like 45 or 44% or whatever of the turret actually matters, right? You push it down, it's like, cool. Okay, we got the ace. We can't get Baron in time, but you know what? We can hit the turret for 1,000 health and then recall and actually get something to show for it. I think it's really, really cool. I like that a lot. I think it's a very good thing. I would actually add something that I think should exist is turret health regen should only be out of combat. Let's just not have the turrets regen until they're done being hit. It's very, very minor. It means almost nothing, but hey, maybe we can get that chunk out in time. Really, really minor thing. Either way, I think this is really cool. I think it's a good change. I like this. Next up, turret gold. Total gold value for tier 2 turret is the same, just pushed more onto the individual. If you solo kill a tier 2 turret, you get 100 more gold, and your teammates all get 25 less. Great, more individual snowballing. Feels good, man. Keep in mind that Demolish got buffed a couple patches ago, and so like going Resolve secondary and getting those turret kills is nice. Keep in mind inhibitor turrets are more frail, and you can in fact get 1/3 of the health bar down and have it matter, which is basically just like walk up, hit it twice, trigger Demolish. Okay, it's been chunked by 1/3. That's some pretty cool stuff. That's some good split push power. So that's kind of nice. Next up, changes to the jungle. Baron, Nashor, much lower attack speed, much lower bonus damage. Much lower bonus damage. Also, his spells no longer shred armor and MR. So it basically no longer shreds armor and armor basically at all, because corruption stack is 0.5 armor and magic resist per stack, and it stacks twice, like twice per 3 seconds. It basically doesn't even exist as a mechanic anymore. Whatever, okay, cool. They're just making Baron a lot easier, which again is like, hey, let's have that 23-minute game that was definitely going to end just actually end. And so here's Baron Nashor DPS. Keep in mind, Baron deals 1x his total attack damage plus his corruption thing, which is, you know, now 60 plus whatever. And so the DPS is down by a factor of like 30%. And he shreds less armor and MR with his spells, which is every 6 autos he casts a spell, then does 6 more autos. This is a very substantial DPS decrease. Yes, Baron got a bit tankier. It's a bit of a longer skirmish, so that like if your opponents go for it, you can try to stop them. But they're going to be much less injured. There is much less need for a tank overall. Judging by these changes and the changes that were listed in 8.10, they were intended to be damage down. I don't see how. I ran the numbers on 8.10. You guys might have been there with me. It didn't really do that. Whatever. Either way, this is where we are now. Or 8.9, I forget. It doesn't really matter. Either way, Baron is much easier to kill in terms of him not doing very much damage. And so again, those 23-minute games, grab the Baron, go to the end of the game. Okay. More going on to this patch as we crest the nearing 1.5 hour mark. Scuttle Crab respawns more slowly. Now matches actually basic camp respawn, but the shrine lasts for longer, which is kind of cool, I guess. Basically, yeah, so scuttles are less important in the game overall, and the overall XP in the game goes up by a little bit. Now, keep in mind, though the level 1 XP value is the same, unless something changed that I missed, camps spawn at level 2. So even the very first beginning of the camp is actually worth a bit more XP. Not a ton, but, you know, 1/6 of this gain, this 12 plus 11 is 23, 1/6 of that is in the camp the first time you kill it. 1/6 of this plus 10 XP is in the camp the first time you kill it. 1/6 of this plus 9 XP is in the camp the first time you kill it. And 1/6 of all this. So, okay, cool. Ultimately, there were some graphs that got posted a couple weeks ago. If you go and look at, I think it was one of the Meddler Quick Thoughts posts. I'll find the link and put it in the description below so you guys can look at that as extra reading. But he basically talked about like how much XP junglers are really getting. And yeah, they're getting level 3 much later because they're not getting it off of 2 or 3 camps, depending on the route. But they're getting it back by mid-game anyway. And they're just deciding, let's give it back to them a little bit earlier than mid-game. Ultimately, for me, I have not noticed a change in my jungler's effectiveness in the game so far. My games have still been their jungler does well, my jungler does well, the other one complains that jungle sucks, and we all play League of Legends because the game is still very, very much the same. And much like every other player in the game, mains of a role or of a champion tend to be very whiny. That's my opinion. I mean, I'm an AD carry player, and trust me, AD carry players are whiny. I guarantee you, if Cassiopeia and Yasuo become strong in meta bot laners, everyone's going to complain about how their role sucks. I'm calling it now. Whatever. Because AD carries lost for attack damage, last hitting help for the last little bit of the minion. Whatever. Whatever. It looks like it also matters for all champions, which means this can actually help mid laners and top laners play under turret, which is cool. Like, there's going to be times where you're going to get a last hit you weren't going to before. So, congrats on your buff, everyone else. Big ARAM changes are really cool. Actually, we'll go over them because I quite like them. The way it was coded to be level 3 before is you just were level 3 with 0 experience, which means it took you 7 years to get level 4. Now you get level 4 really quickly, so the game is accelerated from a growth perspective. Game is accelerated from a surrender perspective. You can get an S more likely, which is kind of nice. Start of base gates that you can like buy in peace, which is a good buff, of course, and thing as well. They're adding some items for fun. And where's the health relic thing? There's a health relic buff as well, where you grab it, basically casts redemption that is team agnostic and heals everyone. So like that singed flash and then grabs the health relic, you're like, okay, and then you stand in it and get the heal anyway, which I kind of like actually. Like lets you play for like area control and stuff. Seems kind of cool. Oh, here's that. Also, they removed Warmogs and they nerfed Dark Harvest, which is also really good. Warmogs is dumb. So yeah, lots of good ARAM changes. Also, it's going to be on Butcher's Bridge, which is going to be cool. That's going to look really nice. I'm excited to play ARAM on that. Gonna be fun. Gonna look forward to it. Absolutely. Especially with Ultimate Hunter, because that's going to be super free to stack up. This is kind of cool. If people ping location-based pings far from you, you don't hear them as loudly. That's good, because much like what I was talking about before with like player behavior around surrendering because games don't end on time, if you don't hear useless pings as often, the ones you do hear, you're more likely to respond to. That's really cool. That's a good thing. Reform pass or reform cards are good. They now make it more clear, which is from pre-game and post-game chat. That's cool. There's a bunch of bug fixes. That's nice. Level up rewards for the high-level players. I'm nowhere near that. Whatever. Dark Waters Diana, Dark Waters Vladimir. Those look cool as well. Some chromas for Diana and Vladimir also in there. And, of course, there's some for, not Kayn, Pike up there. Okay. Let's TLDR the video. Let's TLDR the patch. Oh, my God, that was so much scrolling. In about 5 to 8 minutes. Okay, Pike is cool. You should play him. He's going to be fun. Anivia was slightly weak, but not really. She's going to get a bunch of mid-game power because her Q cooldown. That's kind of nice. Graves definitely overbearing. Going to lose some early game power. Going to be totally fine otherwise. Kha'Zix loses the passive on the R evolve, but has a much stronger active R evolve. It's going to be scary. There's a chance Kha'Zix is just strictly stronger as a result. We'll see. It's really hard to tell because big changes. Kindred kind of sucks right now, getting better mark spawns, mostly because Scuttlecrab got kind of taken from the champion. Gonna probably still be weak, but nice to see that buff. Quality of life for LeBlanc. Lee Sin gonna get a lot of support for CDR builds, getting more energy back on auto attacks, and having his abilities properly account for CDR. You were getting shortchanged on the stat before now. Rakan, a very strong and slightly OP support, getting nerfs to his defensive aspects, still a very good offensive champion. Talia should be losing some wave clear abilities and going to be losing a lot of in-combat movement speed, but getting a lot more roaming movement speed, and going to have her W up much more often for the WE combo. So her all-in's probably going to be stronger. Wave are going to be a bit weaker. Roaming going to be better if she can roam. Going to be interesting. I think she's going to be... I'll actually guess she'll be... No, I think she's going to be weaker overall and have to buff her afterwards, because I think the in-combat move speed is a very big deal and she lost it. Urgot getting very big buffs. I think he'll be an exceptionally strong top laner, worth everyone trying to play. These buffs seem really big. Also, there's a good chance that jungle Urgot will be viable. I recommend you try it. Victor, exceptionally weak coming into the patch. Some good power into his Q from levels 8 onwards. Some power into his R once you get some ability power, which of course you always have at least some because of your passive item. Needs the buffs. Probably needs more, to be honest, but Victor might just have to sit sub 50 though, just because of like his strengths could be uniquely good for pro because of E's wave clear being so good. Not sure, who knows. Xin Zhao getting, I think, way too light of love taps, gonna still be an S tier jungler. Zyra, I thought was already a good support, but going to be even stronger. Going to be, I think, a solid A-tier support for solo queue. I think she should be viable in pro play as well. Keep in mind, with 8.11 being the pro play patch, Zyra is going to poke out champions without very much health regen. That's going to be a really, really big deal. I talked about base stat adjustments. Here it is. Basically, all the AD carries gain between 6 and 16 health at level 1, and they gain 6 health per level. As compensation, they lost 4 attack numbers. They don't get back into level 13. They lost about 1/3 of their base health regen, and they lost 5 armor if I didn't say that one already. End of the day, Marksman will be more durable and more damaging in the very late game, but are going to be weaker laners. The hope being that they won't outlane everything else in bot lane, and you can play other roles down there. These are the numbers that the design team felt was fair to Marksman while also allowing some growth opportunities down there. I do want to point out that I have seen Yasuo and Ziggs bot lane, and they tend to be reasonably successful. They should be more successful as a result of these changes, and I think we should start seeing the Ziggs and Yasuo and Cassiopeia and all these guys in bot lane more. I'm going to try it. You should too. What's also nice is it will allow for more double AD top and mid comps. Zed mid with a Yasuo top lane or a Talon top lane is okay because Ziggs and Cassio are good bot laners now. That's the hope, that's the dream. We'll see if it happens. Mastery and Nocturne getting essentially buffs to their clear speed. Diana getting some buffs to her clear speed as well. New item called Storm Razor tends to be affinity for assassins. It's basically a sheen. You do 1.6x your total attack damage in your first auto attack and get some move speed. This feels like a decent 4th item to grab on any kind of fighter type. Could be really good on Fiora as well. Keep in mind that every 3-ish seconds, you just Q someone and maybe... Okay, actually, I don't think it'll work with your Q because I don't think your Q can crit, but if you can Q auto, there you go. Maybe it will. Maybe somehow, for some reason, Storm Raider works with Q. I doubt it does, but again, there's ways this can work. Still looks pretty cool. Infinity Edge, huge reshape. Basically, you should never rush IE first. That's hard trolling. But as far as an item alongside a Zeal upgrade, it's actually pretty good. It's basically sharpened to be an anti-tank item. This unique passive is better than this unique passive once your targets have 167 armor. That's only tanks. Basically, the goal is that crit marksmen are going to be better anti-tank than they are anti-squishy in current form. That is generally true based on the numbers that I've seen so far. Essence Reaver no longer is a crit item. It's a, much like sort of with the Storm Razor up there, it's basically a, hey, let's be a caster champion. Let's be a caster AD champion. No longer gives crit chance, but still gives some mana restore. And says, hey, after you ult, here's some attack speed and some ability restore. That seems pretty good. This is a pretty fun thing, I think, that people can play around with. Essence Reaver for caster ADs, both melee and range. Last Whisper is going to become a garbage item until you can upgrade it. That's fine. Doesn't need to be good, but really don't set on this item. It is not going to be good. But instead, Lord Dominik's exists, and essentially the way the math works out, it is a far superior anti-squishy item and a bit less good against tanks. It's basically between an 18 and a 36% damage amp based on how much armor your opponents have. That's what value the unique passive has. Lord Dominik's will be good. And again, much like we talked about how IE got pushed towards being anti-tank, the other items got pushed towards being more average. So your best tank busters are crit marksmen because they have extra tools that people don't have. No one has the kinds of tank busting of Old Lord Dominic's. Only new IE does that, and so there's more diversity in roles. So now, if you're considering, ooh, do we play a marksman, a crit marksman or not, and you see, they've picked Ornn, maybe you say, yep, we got to pick Ash, grab the IE, let's go. I do not know, by the way, how Ash works with crits. I assume it's... Actually, I don't know, and I can't tell you. I'm not going to even bother trying to guess. I'm sure someone else knows. Giant Slayer no longer exists, whatever. Mortal Reminder is now a slightly tuned down version of Lord Dominic's, but still has that healing reduction. And this is going to be, I think, a best in slot, in a lot of cases, assassin item if your opponents have healing. If not, you're just going to go for simple Lord Dominic's. But this is very, very efficient. It's a very good item if you're trying to kill any target overall and there is healing. The gold efficiency truly is there. Mortal Reminder, a great item. Zeal and all of its upgrades are getting less efficient. Crit marksmen are going to scale much later into the game, and the hope, I think, from the designers is that the power spike comes late enough because items like rapid fire cannon are so insanely gold inefficient. They suck until you finish IE, which is 2,900 plus like 3,600 or something gold. It is truly late into the game that you get online. Truly late into the game. And the hope is that there's enough room in the mid game now that an Essence Reaver, Lord Dominic's, Yomu's Ghostblade Lucian shows up and shoots his guns and has a meaningful amount of time to play with. Small buffs to lifesteal items. Again, these are the more average items that kind of everyone could pick up. What's kind of nice is it means that the crit marksman who eventually picked up lifesteal later on in the game gets to get some of their gold back at this point in, since they're spending 300 more for a Hurricane, 300 more for a Shiv, and 300 more for an Infinity Edge. They get to save 200 on their Blade of the Rune King. But also, if you're going like, hey, I'm Lucian with the Essence Reaver, some other cool stuff, you've got another cheap item to tack on, and so you can keep surging forward. For the first three items, non-crit marksmen are getting buffed, and the crit marksmen are getting nerfed. Power spikes are moving apart. Swallows of Malum Mortius, whatever. Guardian Angel, less gold efficient. You can sit on a Chain Vest. Banner of Command now affects all champion damage to some degree. That's a cool change. I like that quite a bit. That seems quite good. Less gold efficient. I think we'll see less of the item overall, which is probably a good thing. Shirley has less gold than Vladimir, better on most other champions. More of the gold is into the base mana regen. Runic Echo is now exceptionally powerful. I think it's finally up to warrior tier in terms of gold efficiency. That's a good thing. Fleet Footwork, buffed for melee, nerfed for range, helps Yasuo play bot lane and survive bot lane and poke against bot lane. Halo Blades, super cool keystone. It's basically immediate lethal tempo, but short-lived. This seems super exciting. We'll see it on someone like Vayne maybe. We'll see it on someone like Twitch maybe. Going to be really exciting. Ultimate Hat is now in a Domination rune and is based on the Hunter stack system. Looks really cool. Ultimate Hat replaced by move speed after casting Ultimate. My first thought is this is a Singed rune, which is cool. We'll see where it actually goes. It looks exciting though. And Mini Dematerializer pushed back to the second cannon minion when it turns on. The base is now easier to crack by a pretty substantial health margin on Inhibitor and Nexus turrets. And once you take down 1/3 or 2/3 of the health of a turret, it no longer regenerates past that point, which is really cool and going to be exciting to see like partial turret takes mean a little bit in the game. Turret gold more towards local, help the individual snowballing. Specifically, tier 2 is where the effect is in. Baron Nashor loses about 30% of its DPS in the fight, which is a really big deal, and is going to make Baron even easier to kill, which is pretty cool. Less value on Scuttle Crab, more value on the overall jungle clear, as junglers will now get up to where they were before a bit earlier into the game, which seems nice. Big changes to ARAM look really cool, and that's going to do it for the TLDR. Hopefully, I didn't drone on too long when talking about some of those pieces. Either way, thank you all very much for watching. I've been trying to stream a bit more. You can catch that in the link below me down there. It's twitch.tv/phreakstream. I will be also hosting the analyst desk for the semis and finals of the North American Collegiate Championship, or whatever it's actually called. I'm not sure, but that's coming up in about 1 week's time. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be really cool. Going to be looking forward to working on that. I believe it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in about 1 week. And in 2 weeks, the LCS resumes. Going to be exciting. Love you all. Watch all that stuff. It's going to be fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.